enough. And without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way and invite Colleen to bring us up to date on various things that we have been engaging with NASBA on. Colleen, welcome. Good morning, and please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
I had to redock my computer, and thank you for fitting me in. We're having our board meeting, NASBA board meeting today, and it's lunch hour, so this was a terrific time for me to join you. And of course, we're getting ready for the annual meeting next week, so things are interesting here in Nashville today. So I am going to share my screen, if that's okay.
Please do.
Hopefully, yeah, it looks like that's going to work. And okay, are you seeing the full screen? Not like a presentation mode, right?
Yes,
We are seeing the full screen, yes.
Okay, terrific. All righty, so yes, I was asked to speak about a few things, and I was also asked to leave some time so you could ask me questions. So I'm definitely going to do that too. I'd like to start by just giving a brief kind of COVID update. And here we are so many months later and still dealing with things, but hopefully you've heard about some of this, but I thought I would summarize some of the things that have been happening. The test center availability and capacity is good internationally, really. There are always going to be hotspots here and there where we need to work with candidates to reschedule, or there may be more social distancing, but the availability and the capacity is good. And if any reason, in Washington, you hear otherwise, please, I know your staff does this, but reach out to us. We work with Prometric. They are always monitoring scheduling and how full they are, because they, that's what they sell. They sell time for people to sit in seats, and if they can sell more of it, that's a great thing for them too. So they're incentivized to do that. So they will open up extended hours and weekends and additional days and things as needed. So things are actually pretty good from that perspective. They are still requiring masks. They started to switch over and quit requiring masks, and then the Delta variant arose. And they heard from state boards, actually, from our executive directors and other clients that, on one hand, that's good, but on the other hand, it's going to make other candidates nervous about going and testing. So they kind of reversed themselves on that and left the mask requirement in place. There are a few exceptions, maybe a location, there could be a local rule or something through a university where they cannot require masks, and in those cases they don't. They have to follow what the local rules are. They did reinstate valid ID requirements. They'd gone for a period of time when people couldn't get in and get their driver's license renewed or get their ID renewed. So they were accepting expired IDs, and they've reversed that now, and they aren't accepting expired IDs anymore. They also reinstituted some of the biometrics that they had backed off on during the heat of the virus, where they may now be taking fingerprints again, or some of the photography of the candidate and things like that. So those are reinstituted too. We recently put out to the executive directors and staff the update you see there on the right, which is we are now having to recognize the impact of COVID on people and the concept of long COVID, meaning they've had the virus and they are still dealing with medical issues related to it, whatever those could be. And the federal government is recognizing that that is something, that is a medical issue, and that we have then now said that it may require some accommodation for testing depending on the symptom and the issue. Somebody who can't smell, maybe not, but somebody who has the after effects of pneumonia, or they need oxygen or something like that, that may be different. And we are at this point seeing boards not do what I would call an en masse extension anymore. Everybody, there's no need for it. We're seeing typically it is international candidates who cannot get to a test center that may need an extension on their notices to schedule or 18-month related, or if somebody with maybe they have to quarantine because of a COVID situation, and necessarily may need to reschedule or may need an extension. But we are the states that did the en masse extensions. We're pretty much coming to the end of that. And the states are recognizing that as challenging as it sometimes is, case by case makes more sense, because it is a challenge when you allow everybody to have further extensions. It allows them to procrastinate. They will procrastinate, and often they won't do as well on the exam, because the further away they get from their education, the lower the pass rates. And so that can, we think could have a negative pipeline impact. So that is something we're also seeing. Let's talk a little bit about remote. And by the way, I am leaving time for questions. I don't know if you want to jump in with questions as I go, or you want to hold them. Either way, it's as the board would like to handle it. But I'm going to hit a few topics here, kind of back to back. Remote testing initiative. We had multiple conversations with you starting last October. We actually socialized the idea a year ago, June. And then as we got more information, we shared more information with the boards through webcasts at our annual meetings, at our regional meetings. And we were marching towards asking the states to let us do a pilot of remote testing with a few state boards with a small number of candidates to kick the tires on it and make sure it was going to do what we wanted. AICPA and NASBA were both did what we needed to do from a technology point of view and got ready. Prometric was doing that too. They have constantly, it's a system that's been around for a while called ProProctor, but it is a system that they are also, once they got into COVID and more of their clients wanted to go to it, they were having to, continue to tweak it and improve it for everybody's specifications and requirements. So they were continuing to do that. We got to last spring and we're looking at a pilot and decided once we got in and did some of our user acceptance testing and our testing of the end-to-end product between the three organizations, we decided, we decided to put a pause in that. And I'll explain a little bit more here, but for several reasons. One is it wasn't the urgency of it kind of went away because we were getting through the virus. The test centers were open. They were coming up to the capacity. The ability to handle the candidates was pretty darn good across the country and internationally too. So the urgency of the need for it dissipated. But we also know that long term, this is probably a direction that the testing world is going, and that everything that we were doing was helpful to us as we moved forward with this possibility. But what we were finding is that there were certain areas where we thought that the security around the system could have been improved. And so what we decided to do, and you know that when I've spoken to your board and to the boards in the past, we've said, we'd like your permission to do this pilot, but we're not even going to say we want to do it until we think it's ready for prime time. And that's where we are, as once we got to test it more, we decided that there were certain things that needed to be tweaked and improved from a security viewpoint that we weren't comfortable yet doing a pilot. And so we said, Prometric, let's work together, but let's improve these things that need to be improved to get to the point where we can be comfortable doing a pilot. So we put a pause on it, and I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it's, you know, like in the next month or 2 or 3 or 4 probably, that we're going to be ready to go back to doing the pilot. But we are definitely, it's not come off the table. It just the urgency and our decision that, you know, we want to uphold our word to the boards that we don't want to do it unless it's ready either. And so we decided to put a pause in it. So I wanted to let you know about that. Evolution. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about evolution, and then I'll open it up for other topics that you might have too. And I also realize that sometimes there's new board members. So I always feel like when I talk about evolution, I need to give a little background. So let me, if you'll humor me, those of you that have been around for a while and feel like you know it inside and out, let me just talk a little bit about CPA evolution. What we realized several years ago was that the world is changing drastically. The pandemic layered on after we made this decision. We were already deep into working on things, but that there's so much technological innovation in the world, and in the clients that CPAs work for are dealing with, and that CPAs themselves are dealing with. There's just so much innovation going on, and it just kind of snowballs. It's, as you know, the pace of change just continues to increase. And because of that, and because of other things, there's so many new client and business demands of a CPA, what the clients need. Look at the next one there, changes to core services. We're seeing more and more services, trust services. You know, we have cybersecurity, we have the new ESG things coming along here. There's just always seems to be a lot related to what the new demands on CPAs and what they're being asked to do by their clients, and if the clients are needing that, it also means that we're providing that service in such a way that we're protecting the public. So it becomes very important that what a CPA does, what a CPA needs to know, and how they provide those services ultimately needed to evolve. So what we did was we came up with what's called CPA Evolution as an initiative, and it's a joint project with AICPA and NASBA. And I will tell you, the state boards and the state societies, you know, this is an initiative that's taken a village. And what we're doing is evolving CPA licensure to reflect how the skills and knowledge that CPAs, what they need to know, has changed in this current marketplace. And over the course of a year or two, we received a ton of feedback from stakeholders, including, of course, the state boards, the state societies, firms, academia, the federal regulators, the accreditors, students, current candidates, you name it, we've asked for input from them. And after all of that, and by the way, we continue to want feedback. So even things I talk about today, you're going to see me asking you if you have an interest to get involved in some additional things that are coming down the pike here with evolution. But this is the model that we came up with, and hopefully you've seen it before. And I always have to stress that this is going to culminate in a new CPA examination that is expected to cut over to in January of 2024. So we have the exam we have now, which is going to cut over to this new exam in January of 24. And the model is a significant core that any CPA, anybody who wants to become a licensed CPA needs to know, which is accounting, audit, and tax, that everybody needs to know. I'm going to put something in motion here, and I'm sure it's going to work, that really, we've also talked about technology, and you heard me say this is a big reason for evolution. Technology is baked into everything. We used to show this model and say accounting, audit, tax, and technology. we found that it was confusing because then people thought there would be 4 core sections to the examination, and there are not. We'll get into that in a minute. There are 3 core sections. So, but what it is anybody who wants to CPA has to have this core knowledge and be tested on it. But then they have to show what's different is they have to show expertise, that's not even a good word, competency, increased competency in one of 3 disciplines. Business analysis and reporting, information systems and controls, which is probably the one that feels a little new, and tax compliance and planning. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is the general model that we're working with, and I'll explain more about it as we go. We thought this, excuse me, meant that a newly licensed CPA, right now, they have to know everything about everything, and it's just not a sustainable model. That because of the number of new accounting standards over the years, the number of auditing standards, the complexity of the tax code, and how we keep talking tax simplification, and it keeps getting more and more complex. That really what we needed to say was, well, what does it? Let's cut it back, and what is the core everyone needs to know? They're pillars of the profession, but what are areas of that are of significant interest now? And when you think of a CPA, what do you think about? These are the ones. We'll chat here about that. So let's talk about the exam for a minute. So the examination, what do we expect to stay the same? Still going to be 1 to 2 year level exam. It's not going to be, because of those disciplines, there's not going to be a capstone kind of model. They will have to, it will be no more than a 16-hour exam. And right now we still think we're going to have that each candidate would take 4 sections, and they'll be 4 hours each. So we think we're going to be at 16 hours. No new experience requirement to sit for the exam or even the discipline. So it's not like you take 3 core sections, wait a while and take a discipline. They will pass 4. Each candidate would take 3. All candidates would have to pass the 3 core sections, and then they would choose a discipline in which to be tested. They can take them in any order, just like they can now. If they want to take a discipline first, they could. And there would be no separate time limit to pass the core and the discipline, meaning the 18-month rule would still apply. Once you pass that first section, you have 18 months to pass the remaining 3. So what is going to be different? It is a model in which everybody takes those 3 core, but then they choose 1 of 3 disciplines. So that's a new concept for the CPA examination. They can't take all 3 disciplines. This is a licensure examination. It's a governmental examination. So those are the rules and the parameters that have been put forth. You pass 1. Now, if a candidate says, I'm going to take the bar section, and they take it and fail it, and then they say, well, I'm going to switch and I'm going to take a different one, that's fine. But ultimately they pass 1 core, 1 discipline, and 3 cores. And each section is discrete content. It's not, again, the capstone model where it pulls everything together at a discipline. And what the beauty of the model is, you're a CPA. Once you meet all of the requirements, one of which is the CPA examination, the examination, education, experience. But when you are done, you're a CPA, just like now. You're not a CPA tax specialist or CPA information system specialist. You're a CPA with the rights and privileges that come with that. Here's an example of what the content might look like on each section of the exam. Things that I would highlight is ISC. There is a lot of information system and technology and control there, but it's not 100% IT. There are business processes that would be part of that section. And the SOC engagements would live in that area. The assurance, the attestation kinds of services would be there. BAR is the more advanced, I would say more advanced financial accounting and reporting. With data analytics will be in most sections, by the way, but there could be an enhanced focus here. State and local government accounting would be tested at a very basic level in the core, but then there will be room here to be able to test it more robustly. So we think that that's good. More advanced topics could be tested. So you might get derivatives or fair value accounting kinds of things here that you wouldn't be tested on in a core section. And tax compliance and planning probably goes without saying, but it's more advanced topics. But here's where financial planning is new to the exam. Tax planning is new to the exam. It's always been compliance in the past, but we think that newly licensed CPAs, because you have tax software doing some of the work, you need to be able to understand that it's doing it right and help clients with planning. And so that is something that's being new. And as an example that I would give too is maybe consolidated corporate tax returns could be in TCP, and they wouldn't be in the core. So AICPA writes the examination, and they are in the process of this practice analysis and have been for the past, year now. And they've made a lot of progress. Putting together, considering what should be tested in each section. And they did a survey this summer from early July until early September, asked for people to respond, and it kind of put forth, here's our directional thinking about what might be in each section. And they asked for respondents to say, does this seem right to you? How do you feel like we're getting it right? And they had 411 respondents, and that was a strong agreement with what they were proposing. One reason that they did that is what we didn't want to do is get to next summer when there would be an exposure draft and put something out of a blueprint with lots of detail and have those looking at it say no, that we don't agree with this at all. So they wanted to test the waters and felt good about the response they got this summer. So now they've moved into a confirmation phase, and they're going to be doing survey. They want volunteers to be involved, to do a training session, take a survey, and help. Because now what they've done is they've taken from like the 20,000 foot level down to like the 5,000 foot level, and actually probably lower. And so they're asking for CPAs who supervise newly licensed CPAs. And by the way, it's in specific areas. Like you would, if you're a tax person, you wouldn't have to answer survey questions about audit or about information systems. You would just answer questions on tax. But they need to screen about 450 CPAs, and as of a week or two ago, they were up to 300 that had applied. But then they have to be screened, because you could say, okay, yeah, I'll be involved, I'll sign up for this, but then you may be screened out because of your experience or background. So if any of you or anybody that is observing the meeting today has an interest, please go to this website. We sent something to all state board members and staff about this, and I think a couple times. So you could also look for emails from NASBA if you are with the state board. But I encourage you, if you're interested, it's almost too late, but not quite. So if you're interested, please put something in. Let's talk a little bit about IT as it relates to evolution. NASBA is, we have what's called the National Candidate Database, which all of the state boards participate in. It is like the clearinghouse where all of the candidate information ends up being stored there. We receive scores from AICPA and push them out to the state boards. We receive from the state boards that this candidate meets the requirements and is eligible to sit for this section. And then we communicate with Prometric, get people, so they get people scheduled. So it's a fine, it's like a dance we do between AICPA, NASBA, and Prometric. So the National Candidate Database, or Gateway, we're in the process of updating it for evolution, which is a bigger lift than anybody could have ever expected. But that project is underway and happening now. We're also updating what's called our CPAY systems. where we back office for some state boards, some of the application processes and things, and that is being updated too. So it's a significant lift on NASBA's part. As part of that, we know that we interact with the state boards, electronically, right? We're sending information back and forth through our systems, through different platforms and ways to do that. And we know that state boards may have to consider making some changes to their systems too for evolution. So our team here at NASBA has been having meetings with all of the state boards, and I think they're down to just a few that they need to meet with to make sure they have all of the intelligence we have about how their systems could be impacted. And we've had some great conversations, and we were concerned about how heavy a lift it might be for boards, but we're feeling pretty good based on this first round of conversations. So that's been very, very positive. We've also been talking to the boards, and some of this it's kind of just a nice time to be having the conversation. Let me go on to my next slide here. To talk about the uniformity of notice to schedule lengths and definition of the 18-month period. Some boards have different periods of how long notices to schedule are valid. And we're really trying to get uniformity and encourage the boards to move towards the same notice to schedule lengths and how they define the 18-month period. Like when does the 18-month period start? Does it start when you test? Does it start at the end of the month? Does it start when you get your score? So kind of simple things, but we're taking this time to have those conversations too. And I know we've been having with Washington also. And lastly here, we've been, NAP is NASBA AICPA Prometric. It's called the NAP group, have been having those conversations that we ultimately will absolutely need to be sharing with the boards, but we're still in the process ourselves of figuring out what we think is best about how we're going to cut over from this old exam, from the current exam to the new exam. What is it going to mean? What are we going to have dark periods? We do know that once we shift to the new exam, and we've talked to the boards about this a little bit already, that there may be some periods of some dark periods, maybe some score holds, things like that, that we're going to have to work our way through. The extent of those is what's under consideration now. So kind of watch this space. We will definitely be talking to the boards as we get a better sense of it ourselves. And we're talking about fall of 23 into, spring of 24, which is that kind of cutover period. So what to look for is a summary. There's going to be a transition policy. I'll chat a little bit about that here in a minute. That's going to be coming out imminently. And the blueprint, which is exactly what should be on, it tells the topics, the kind of tasks and things that could be on the exam at a very minute level, will be exposed next summer with the intent of finalizing it by January of 23. So then they are finalized a whole year before the new exam will launch. So that's what we're looking at. Briefly, let's chat about candidates. We've been doing what we call pulse surveys on a periodic basis. This is the one we did in March to show us where the candidates are and their familiarity with evolution. And you can see, 27% very familiar. Not surprising to us and not alarming to us, because we've not been spending a lot of time talking to candidates yet, students. We've been talking, we started with our stakeholders, with the state boards and council at AICPA and the state societies, to kind of make sure everybody agreed that what we were going to do was what we wanted to do. Then we shifted to educators, and I'm going to have something just like this here in a minute for educators, because we needed to talk about curriculums and what we're doing and how it could affect what they may want to teach. But this is where we were with the students in March, and now I'm going to let you see how we went from March with 27%. And even without a lot more communication directly from us, we're up to 43% very familiar. So that we think as we start really communicating that this is going to go up quite a bit, and we're just going to continue to watch that. So what's going to happen soon, that is why are we going to be communicating? This transition from the old exam to the new exam is a really big deal for students who have taken one section or are getting ready to take the exam and under the current examination, and then it cuts over to this new examination in January 24. This is going to affect freshmen, sophomore, your juniors, your juniors, maybe depending on how, if they can get the exam sections passed quickly. Seniors, we hope not, and those in graduate school, we hope not too. The key for them is to get in there, get tested, get done before the examination cuts over. But what may happen is if they are in the middle, we have to have a way to map them from the old exam to the new exam, because we won't be giving both at the same time. January 24, the old exam sections will not be available, and it will only be the new exam sections, and they don't 100% equate. Some are pretty close, but BEC goes away, and then this new discipline concept starts. So we have vetted a policy with the state boards. We sent it to you last June. We talked about it at the regional meetings. I will tell you that policy is where we landed, and we're in the next week or so going to be sending out information to candidates. We will be communicating very much back to the boards first, and then sending it out so everybody else can see it. So we know that's going to create interest and some buzz around the exam. So educators, here's my same pie chart. Here we were in March. So we were already at 75% in March because we were starting to talk with educators earlier than this, and we made a lot of ground. This was not our first pulse survey, but this is where we were in March, and here's where we are in September. So check that out, 95%. Obviously, we've been in the space that accounting educators, we're in their space right now, sharing information and providing some model information that they could possibly utilize. So we're really happy that the educators are engaged and are familiar, because what we don't want is to catch them flat-footed. So what we did was we released this model curriculum in June. It's a sample, it is a model, it's not required. No university, no state board requires it. No university has to use it. In fact, the universities need to be working very closely with their state board to make sure that they understand the rules in their state. But what we did, we knew we needed to provide something. We were actually asked at earlier meetings with educators is give us some guidance. And this is the way that we decided to do it. We had a lot of volunteers, educators, and practitioners involved designing it, coming up with what a model curriculum could look like, but realizing that it is just truly that universities, some universities, they work a lot with government agencies or certain companies. Others have a lot of students who want to take the CPA exam. So all of those things have to be considered. What we're hearing is, we did this pulse survey we asked some questions too, and we got very good response that yes, this is helpful. This gives us a sense of what is happening and now allows us to start looking at our programs and our courses and the learning objectives in those. And so it was helpful, and it has been well received, though not without controversy, because we've heard back from some educators. We've had some letters from AAA, some of their committees, and we're getting some great feedback, and we continue to want feedback. And we're taking that into consideration as we look at tweaks that we may want to make to this model curriculum, and just make sure we're getting the word out about what it really is and what it really isn't. It's a way that universities can say, look at what they're already doing and consider, are there things that they may want to tweak with what they're doing, or topics or coursework that they might want to add. So state law rules and changes. A little bird told me that we know Washington is one of our states here that needed to change its rule to delete the reference to specific exam sections. So I hear that there's been some movement there today. So congratulations on that. I think you had a public hearing, possibly. So this is where the other states are. We're down to 5 states. And every one of them is making progress. I will say, so I think we're feeling good about being able to get this done, but that's the status on that. And lastly, we do have, and I honestly don't know where Washington is on this, but there were updates to the UAA model rules on education last fall, this time, where we provided some kind of modernization of the rules, considering evolution, considering, the ability to accept data analytics, or more focus on maybe some of information systems, and consideration of what the disciplines are, what the core is. And we're asking states just to take a look at that and think about what they may want to be doing in their states. And Washington possibly has already done that. Pipeline briefly, we are very focused on this. This is the pipeline to CPAs. We know that the volume of CPA exam sections taken has been decreasing. And it's up a little bit from 20, but 20 Prometric was closed for a month and a half, and we had the disruption of the pandemic. But it's not coming up the way we thought. In fact, we've had a steady decline over the years. Lots of reasons for that. Happy to chat about it more, but we are hyper-focused on what we can be doing to help pipeline, and we're working hand in hand with AICPA and state societies, and we know the boards probably want to engage on this too, is what can be done, what can we be doing to reverse the pipeline situation. NASBA had a strategic plan update recently, and it's very front and center in our strategic plan. We're doing a lot of brainstorming. We've assigned somebody internally to run point to make sure to keep us accountable to doing what we can do. We know that NASBA wants to focus on candidates in the exam system, maybe those who started who have dropped out, or they're slow to come in and get tested. We want to do a lot to encourage them. So I think we're going to have increased communications to be doing that, to remind people that their notice to schedule, or their 18 months is about out on a section, or their notice to schedule, is about to run out, those sorts of things. And we are going to be engaging with you more to find out what as boards you would like to do and what we can do to help you in this effort too. So lastly, I'm going to close, last slide, just annual meeting is next week. So if you haven't signed up and would like to just please sign up. It's virtual, it's free. We would love to have you join us. I think there's going to be some very interesting sessions. And this is our changing of the guard. So Carlos Barrera, our current chair, will pass the gavel to Mike Fritz, our incoming chair. But these are the meetings coming up next year. So if you don't have them on your calendar, I know our intent, is to have face-to-face meetings, but we will always have a virtual aspect to it, as we've had for a number of years. But these are our locations and where we are planning to have meetings next year. So with that, I will say thank you, and I'm going to quit sharing my slide so I can be back and available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Colleen. Appreciate the detailed briefing on a number of topics that are near and dear to many of our hearts. It's certainly good to get the background on the CPA exam remote proctoring initiative, and I think that's given me some thoughts about how it might affect what we do as board this year, because it seems like that's on the back burner. Is that correct?
I would say it could come back up next summer. I don't think it would come up before then. So
Good.
we think what's happened is we got a lot of things going on right now. So with these big evolution projects, AICPA and NASBA, we know we have to focus on those. We have a hard deadline, and we have a lot of work to do between now and then. So that has to be our first priority. But we also don't want to completely lose the momentum. I think we're looking at there are windows when we could pick it up again, but we need to continue to get work with Prometric on the things that the very specific things we've said to them. These are things that we need you to be working on for us, and we get updates monthly on those. So
Okay.
yes.
I see that there are a couple of hands up, so I'll defer to that. I'm not in any particular hurry on that one, because I understand that evolution is a much bigger piece of the puzzle that has to be resolved in a timely way, and I do have some questions about that. So if there are other questions related to the remote proctoring, we should take them now, and then we can move on to the next topic. That might be a better way to organize our conversation, because we have limited time here. So go ahead, anybody who had questions. Tom, I thought I saw your hand up, and then I see 3 hands up. Dave, you have your hand up. Brian and Thomas, I saw Tom first. So we'll go in that order. Tom, and then Dave, and then Brian.
Hi, this is Tom Swatsy. Colleen, thanks for visiting with us. And my question is not about remote proctoring, Rajiv, is that okay?
I was hoping to just bunch them together, because I know the evolution will probably have a lot of questions, but if you want to just throw it out there, that's fine.
Oh, so yes, even though not about remote proctoring.
Let's wait. Dave, I'll go to Dave, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is not about remote proctoring either.
Okay, good. So any questions about remote proctoring?
Yes, in a sense, Brian Thomas, Colleen, and I was, thankful for the presentation today, and I would just encourage you to continue your webcasts on a quarterly basis or so. Even though it's been backburnered a little bit, the amount of information that I heard this time compared to last time is a huge change, a huge increase. So just step in every quarter or so and give us another one of your webinars with you and Michael and Prometric.
Okay. Made a note.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That's a very, very thoughtful suggestion. It'll keep us on track with what's happening out there. Okay, so then, are there any other questions about the remote administration of the exam? If not, let's move on to the next one, which is the big one in my view, CPA evolution. So are there any questions about evolution and the evolution project? I have a question myself, but I'd prefer to kind of pose it maybe later. Dave, Tom, I see hands up.
Yes, again, my question is not, there's a couple of questions in chat, but probably not with this particular topic, and my questions are not this specific either.
Okay, Tom, how about you?
Oh, sorry, do you want me to take my hand down until you're ready to?
No, that's fine. I'm just going through. So there is a question about this in the chat. That's from Scott Fabiani Beeman. And he asks, do the sectional changes impact reviews used by Kaplan, Wiley, Becker, etc.? If so, is there a resolve? Colleen, do you want to take that one?
Sure, it absolutely does. Yeah, it absolutely, we refer to this group as the review course providers. And interestingly, they actually have a loose association called APA, CPA. It's this, you know, the Kaplans, the Wileys, the Beckers, and others that we meet with on a semi-annual basis. When it's not COVID, we're face to face in New York or at other meetings. And we go through anything happening on the exam, and we always give an evolution update. So they are, as you can anticipate, eagerly awaiting what the new exam is going to look like. Another reason why we, you know, they too are seeing everything that we're putting out. So they saw the surveys that were done this summer. They're going to get the exposure draft in summer of 22. They will get the final version in January of 23, a year ahead of time. We can't share information with them that we don't share publicly to everybody else, but they get it. We answer questions and they all get to hear the same answers. And so we work with them and they are considering what's changing. I will say the model curriculum was probably helpful for them too, because it gave them a sense of new content that they probably needed to be preparing for. So we work with them, they're aware, and we do everything we can to keep, because you know they're a valued resource for the candidates, and we know that, and so we want to do what we can to work with them.
I have a question on this, and it's a broad one. I'm wondering how involved has NASPA been in the conversations that the AICPA has been having? You mentioned the AAA report, right? The AAA is a stakeholder because they're a vendor in some sense of accounting talent, right? Mm-hmm. They provide the education that forms the basis for candidates to be qualified to take the CPA exam. So these academic institutions and the AAA has put forward, the AAA Council and a bunch of others have put forward several kind of significant reservations about the model curriculum. And I'm wondering how deeply NASBA has been engaged in thinking about those concerns, especially as they might impact the ability of the profession, the AICPA, to attract people who have the necessary intellectual competencies and training to effectively discharge the responsibilities of a CPA. So the AAA has identified, I think, there's 8 or 9 letters that they've written. They've shared that with the AICPA.
They shared it with us.
Has NASPA seen those?
We have.
You have.
And we are in the trenches with AICPA, as we have been through everything with model curriculum. The task forces that were put together to actually come up with the model curriculum were made up of AICPA appointed people and NASBA appointed people. We had state board members in every task force. We made sure that it was a blend of educators, some with backgrounds with involvement in AAA or AACSB or other accreditors, and some that weren't, but also practitioners. Our incoming Vice Chair, Rick Reisig, as an example, was on one of those task force. It was, I think, core related. I don't know if it was audit or FAR. So we wanted the educated, we wanted a practitioner perspective too on what would be important to be taught. And I will say we very much value the input that we're getting, that we got from the AAA committees. But I will say you're going to get, the reason we maybe got 8 was one came from an international committee and one came from a management accounting committee and one came from a different committee. And some of them are going to say, well, the international, we need more international on the exam. And then management will say, we need more management on the exam. The challenge is how much real estate do we have and putting it all together holistically. We are very much, Dan Dustin and I meet with Sue Coffey and Carl Mays and Mike Decker, actually, from AICPA every week. And we've reviewed those letters and we're considering any changes that might come as a result of those. That's why I say we are going to be tweaking. I use the word tweak just for no other word, that it's not going to be a big wholesale change. But some of the things that were brought up, very valid things that maybe we could improve on and update. We don't want to make a lot of changes to it because a lot of educators, a lot of universities are taking it and already trying to, instill it in some way into their curriculum. But there was some very good feedback that we're taking to heart and we're including. And other things, part of the concern is timing, how quickly we're doing this, but because we know academia never struggles to do things quickly because of the systems and the governance in place. And so what we're trying to do is provide examples of how it can be with less angst and without the requirement of adding new courses and things, which we know is very difficult, what can be done. So trying to also provide, and that there's a lot of resources out there. We've been providing through This Way to CPA, there's forums, there's case studies, there's a lot of things going on too. So we are in the trenches though, I will say.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I think from what I have reviewed so far, and I'm not sure that the other board members have, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much. I think we'll get into it maybe over the course of time by placing it on the board agenda. We'll see about that. But my thought is that the things that have come to my attention, at least, seem to suggest that this has some significant implications for the diversity of the population that we can attract and for the implications for students from under-resourced schools. And so that is something that will definitely affect the public interest, because who CPAs are, where they're coming from, who is able who faces the burdens of entering the profession. Those are clearly things that do affect the supply. We're all concerned about that. Right. So it would be
that's part of our pipeline conversation,
right.
Diversity. I will say there are some things I couldn't cover all of real estate today, but next week at the annual meeting, we are going to be talking about diversity, but we are also going to be talking more about pipeline and initiatives there and some surveys. I talked about this Pulse survey. We surveyed some minority students and candidates, and I think you'll be interested to see some of the results of those surveys too, where it's very highly of mind. And actually there's a presentation from someone from one of the big 4 firms about an initiative that they're undergoing to very much help students who maybe can't get a master's degree in accounting, but are cobbling together their hours in different ways. So I think if you can make it next week, I think there's going to be a lot of interesting information shared there.
Great. That's a great point. So that's actually a good setup to segue out of this topic. And I think, Jen, were you trying to?
I'm just being mindful of Colleen's time. So I know there's 2 other people who want to speak. So we want to get Tom out there and Dave.
Right. And so I wanted to segue to those issues next. And I'll just recognize Tom. And Tom, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Rajiv. Colleen, just real quick, I'm recognizing the time issues kind of at a high level, and you may have been teed up on these topics in advance by Dave or Jen, but could you walk us through the process of how you handle a complaint related to sexual harassment or discrimination, just to get on a real high level? And then secondly, how does your contract with Formetric, say, or how does it work or tie in with that issue? Thanks.
Right. Yeah, I was given a little bit of a heads up, so thank you. And I realized that I didn't cover it in my presentation. It felt like a very different topic. So I appreciate that you brought it up, because if you didn't, I was going to during this section. What we do is, first of all, Jen asked us to go back and look about any complaints that we've had over the past 5 years. And we've had one. So it's not of that kind of nature, you know. It's not, we do not, you're always going to get a complaint of noise in a test center, or the test center didn't open on time, or those kinds of things come up periodically. But something of a significant nature, we have not had, and frankly, we don't get them nationally or internationally either. So they're very, very rare. But what we have is, we have what's called candidate care at NASBA. So we have people that are just assigned, that is their job, is to help people who have an issue in a test center. And they are advised to email our candidate care and report any complaints or concerns about their testing experience. And that they are advised of that in the candidate bulletin and in the confirmation of attendance. So there's multiple places where they're advised of that. And it, depending on the nature of the complaint, say it's related to content of the exam, we would send it to AICPA. But if it is something related to test center experience, we then send it to Prometric and work with them. And upon receipt, what happens, we begin an investigation. We request digital video recordings from Prometric. So any candidate who's testing in a test center, they're recorded the entire experience, like when they come into the lobby, by the lockers, while they're testing. So we will request the digital video recording and review it. And we make sure that Prometric begins an investigation on their side too. And we report our findings and actions taken to the candidate in those situations. If a board contacts us about a complaint, then we also do the same thing, but we go back to the board and share what's going on. And then we do quarterly reports of the nature of the kind of complaints that we've had, that we share with all the executive directors on a quarterly basis. It's not at a specific candidate level, but it is the nature of, and it shares that information. I will say, related specifically to the situation I believe that you're probably referring, we did pause and look at what happened in the particular situation and instituted new controls, new policies. So if a situation related to those kinds of issues came up again, we immediately take it directly to our operations folks, bring it to our legal team, who takes it to a legal team set up specifically for this kind of thing at Prometric. And so it is then handled at that level and gets immediate attention from the organization. So I'm not sure if that's helpful.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dave?
Thank you. Just a couple of real quick things. Really wanted to thank you for your time to be here today for all of us, mostly because hearing it straight from you, and you're living, breathing, eating this every day of your life, you can convey a very clear message. Really appreciate that. The second thing is, I'm going to be checking in with you offline because I do have a candidate bulletin suggestion, and so I'll be reaching out to you for a point of contact.
Terrific.
And then thirdly, there was a question in the chat, is if we could get a copy of your PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, you can, and I will PDF it, and I will provide. Should I send it to Jen, or how do you want me to you?
Jen, I think Jennifer's fine. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, absolutely. And it's my pleasure to join you today. I don't think I've ever gotten to join the Washington board, maybe about remote. No, not even remote. You're one of the few boards that I did not talk to directly about remote testing last winter. So it's just my pleasure to join you. I lived in Seattle for some years when I was young. So Washington is near and dear to my heart. I love Washington.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Colleen.
you.
And
Thank you,
Colleen, Colleen, and just so you can go back to NASBA and let them know, the board just passed the rule and will be in effect here in 30 31 days, that we did take out the sections. And we also, based on Pat's guidance, took out the fact that we no longer will be considering a pass score at the date they took the exam. We're gonna go off the release date, which I think aligns with
Yes.
every other state board. So just wanted to take that news back. Thank you so much for your time and speaking with the board. We really appreciate it. You need to go ahead and send me that PowerPoint. Thanks.
Great. I will do that. Thank you. It's
Take
been my
care.
pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Colleen.
Mr. Chair, just, you will still see my, I don't know if you still see my hand up or not. My computer is showing my hand is still up. I'm unable to lower it. So
No
if you see
worries.
it up, it's not because I have a new question.
Okay, I have just exercised my executive privilege to lower your hand.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, thank you. That was a very informative conversation. And I alluded to some reports that I have been receiving in my capacity in my day job as an accounting professor at the University of Washington. So I will post links and I will share that information with everybody in due course, where there are some comments that I think impinge mostly on us in our role as a board, as thinking about the supply of potential CPAs to the Washington economy. So I'm mainly focused on the parts which talk about access, but there may be other things that are of interest. I'll just post a link and then we can sort of confer and decide whether it is something that we want to get into in more detail in terms of thinking about what's going on with CPA evolution, or we may as a board decide not to come back to this and just move on, declare victory and move on. That's remains to be determined, but I will post the link so that everybody knows the body of literature I was referencing, okay? With that
Bridget?
remark then, yeah, go
Bridget?
ahead.
I say it's right now, it's 11:03 on my clock. Maybe we should take a break before we start getting back into, I think you were at the committee chair.
Yes, I
member.
was there and I'm wondering, should we take a break now, finish the
Yeah,
committee?
why
Let's
not?
just take the
Why
break
not?
now.
Why don't
Let's
we
just
take a 10-minute break?
Yeah, 10-minute break. All right. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break now. We
We'll
will
be back
resume
at
at 11:14 by my clock.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.